So if you raise your hands, yes, sir. There's a roving mic for you.
Thank you. I ask this question not in a confrontational way, but as somebody who is deeply appreciative of all that I have learned from you. As you have, I could ask this about any religion, but let's focus on Judaism. Are there any aspects of Judaism which you respect, admire, appreciate, and if so, what are they?
Okay. I mentioned one. The question was audible to all, I hope. Yeah. I mentioned one, which was the Judaism invites people to study its negation. I mean, I believe, with many others, that everything, Matthew Arnold, Leo Strauss, many others, everything is a choice, a struggle between Athens and Jerusalem. I'm with the Athenian side. I wish that the other side had won on Hanukkah and that Jews had become the vectors of Greek philosophy in the world. I think that would have been wonderful. I think it's a real shame the Maccabees won that time. If they hadn't won, there'd be no Christianity and no Islam. We could have skipped the whole bloody thing. And so I'm impressed, though, that the Orthodox say, here's what you mustn't believe. And they told them to study Greek and not to become Epikuros. Very few religions are as generous as that. And it's a tribute to the skepticism and the constant doubt that is involved. And is, I think, necessary, by the way, for survival, and probably is one of the reasons why this tribe did survive so much and for so long. That it did, in a way, keep an open mind as well as a great discipline and tradition. Then Jews don't proselytize much. Among other Jews they do, the Lubavitch do, for example, but they generally don't. What always alarms me about Christians and Muslims is they say, we have this wonderful secret. We have a personal God who really loves us, and if you believe in him, since I believe in him, I'm going to be saved. In fact, I'm not even going to die. And you'd think that would make them happy, but it doesn't. They can't be happy until you believe it too, by force. Well, fuck that. I haven't got a minute of my life to spend being proselytized by these riffraff. And then third, the Jews don't make the elementary stupid mistake of saying the Messiah's already come. So, and they do well in exile. And as I say, I mean, I think they found another exile in Palestine, and I don't think that the irony of that has quite yet sunk in, but I think that it will. Oh, sir, excuse me, I didn't see your hand.
Thank you for being here.
Pleasure.
My question is, I worry about the idea of a degree of anti-Semitism that you mentioned in the middle part of your lecture. I mean, how does one know the difference between harmful and harmless anti-Semitism, and also wouldn't the harmless people be the rats in the plague in the sewer analogy that you used?
Well, of course, the people who, so to say, have it mildly could become the gullible victims of someone who is much less scrupulous. That's possible. But I do think it's worth making the distinction. That's why I took the risk of showing you the hideous visage of Mr. Gibson, because you see there someone who's really got it bad, and you can tell the real thing. And I happen to know the backstory, so I thought I'd start off like that. I mean, I know where it comes from. People who say, well, that's what you get for giving your money to Bernie Madoff, for example, are probably not going to kill you. By the way, anyone who says, did you say your name was Madoff? Oh, then in that case, you can have my money. Probably does deserve a pasting. But it's actually while I'm on this subject, it's quite surprising. There was a time in America when a thing like that would have led to quite a lot, I think, of public and unofficial anti-Jewish feeling. It really hasn't. And I believe I know why, because almost everyone in the United States now has a Jewish friend. Many, many, many people have a Jew somewhere in their family. They know not to generalize, which wasn't true in the old days to the same extent. And I have a feeling that in the United States it's very well controlled, so to say. I'm not going to say this is the promised land, but I think that it should be a great Jewish project to keep the secular constitutional democracy of the United States going. So, given that I do believe that the prejudice is ineradicable because it appeals to the pseudo-intellectual, to the conspiracy theorist, to the envious and the jealous person, to the gullible person, it has all these human faculties on its side, you're not going to get rid of it. I think it's important to pick your enemies with some care and distinction. Sir. Sorry, ma'am. I was wondering what you'd done with your women. You're next. No, sorry, next for the lady, please.
Thank you. You mentioned your concern or interest in the liberals who you see as anti-Semitic. Having worked on the staff of both Martin Luther King and Jimmy Carter in the civil rights movement, and seeing some of those who, particularly Jimmy Carter as a case example, who would never have his picture taken with Dr. King while he was alive, and some in the liberal side of the Jewish community who didn't get involved, very, very, very few of us served on the front lines, try to take the civil rights movement situation with the underdog of the African Americans and put that into the Middle East where the Palestinians become the underdogs and the Jews become the racists. And do you think that's maybe a little overcompensation for the fact that at the time when there was such a clear thing going on in our country, very few people went on the front lines and didn't understand that the final stage was reconciliation? And if you look at the Palestinians, there's within the leadership so few Hamas or whatever, the charters that want reconciliation. So how can you compare the civil rights experience in America or try to connect that to what's going on in Israel? And I see that as a huge problem on the left, all good-hearted, but completely wrong.
Not all of it good-hearted, I'd say, but I think, yes, I think you identify the allegorical problem quite well. There are people who are looking for analogy in those two situations, and sometimes finding it, not just on the left, by the way. If you read Saul Bellows' novels, and nonfiction too, if you read Mr. Samler's Planet, and then you read his To Jerusalem and Back, you'll see that he has almost exactly the same worries about confrontations with black power forces in Ocean Hills, Brownsville, in New York, or in Chicago, South Side, as he does about the Middle East. He feels it's an entangled question, and registers it, I might say, very, very finely some of the time, and I must say rather crudely. I'm an admirer of his at other times. It's a strange thing that in Northern Ireland, in the slums of Belfast, the Republican slums fly the flag of the PLO, and the Orange Ulster Unionists very often put up the Israeli flag. Conor Cruise O'Brien wrote a great book, perhaps you've read it, called The Siege, making a comparison between the three sort of post-colonial redoubts in the Third World, Israel, South Africa, and Northern Ireland. All of these very uncomfortable associations to be having. I don't think that that's the problem with the left, however, at the moment. I wish that that's all it was. What's happened with a lot of the left is that they genuinely think that Islamic jihadism is a movement of brown-skinned, disempowered people who've had a hard time. If they're against the United States empire, they must be doing something right. So, and most of these people are fantastically ignorant. They know nothing about it. They've cared not at all to inform themselves. So if you say to them, actually Al-Qaeda begins in India, Pakistan, as an attempt to destroy the brown-skinned multi-ethnic democracy of India by wrenching Kashmir out of the Indian state and starting a civil war, that it makes war on the other Asian democracies of the Philippines and Indonesia, in all cases trying to build a separate ultra-fundamentalist Muslim state. They didn't know that at all. They just feel it must be owed something. And in several cases, including my old publisher, New Left Books, explicit texts have been produced saying that since the world proletariat turned out to be a bit of a disappointment, it never did what we asked of it, at least now there's an alternative source of power, a mass disenfranchised movement of resentment against. And lately I've noticed that bin Laden's been getting this and playing it back. He's been recommending to people that they read Noam Chomsky, for example. I don't know what Noam thinks when he reads this. And he shouldn't be blamed for it. But they're trying to get more subtle about it, too. These people who want homosexuals to be buried alive, who want women to be slaves, who want, you know the story. You know what the Taliban is like. Still think they might trick themselves out in some discarded left colors. It's a disgusting business. Symbolized in the recommendation of Michael Moore's films by the Al-Qaeda, too. Very low cultural level. Ma'am. Here's the mic.
Laryngitis. No, it's okay. Thank you for a marvelously elucidative and erudite presentation, Christopher.
Thank you.
My question is, do you think that films such as An Education, which is up for several awards right now, has a subliminal, or perhaps a not so subliminal effect on the American psyche?
I'm sorry to say I don't know the movie you talk about. Movies aren't made for people like me anymore. I don't go.
Oh, maybe.
But if movies in general, well, you know what? I mean, the Passion of the Christ, for example, which I thought, I was amazed that something that was not just anti-Semitic, but was incitingly anti-Semitic, could be shown without protest. Actually had practically no effect. I mean, there were one or two churches in Kentucky put up a sign outside on Sunday saying the Jews killed our Lord. But that was about the limit of it. Most people don't remember now how dangerous it used to be a Jew in Boston on Easter time and be accused of being a Christ killer. Older Jewish people remember it very well. Younger Jews don't, and younger Christians don't. They aren't taught that anymore. It's in a way encouraging. That's what nauseated me about Gibson, doing an end run around this and making sure it got to the Middle East with the ugly stuff put back in. And that's what shows what a little Nazi puke he is. And that's why I don't see how he's allowed to just walk around Los Angeles, if you don't mind my saying so. What is this?
And how serious do you consider Farrakhan's rants and protestations against Jews to be against the Jewish people?
Well, two things about that. I remember once reading an account of, this is years ago, but I'm practically certain it was in a suburb of Los Angeles. There was an outbreak of swastika painting at a Jewish cemetery and on Jewish shops. And of course, huge kerfuffle, headlines, agony meetings, what's happening, all this stuff. They caught the hooligans who'd done it, who it turned out had no idea what a swastika was, didn't know about the Nazi Party, but just knew that if you do that, you always get attention. That upsets people, so let's go do that. Now, I don't think Farrakhan is quite in that category, because obviously he has a problem of belonging to a very debased form of sectarian Islam that takes part in a lot of anti-Jewish paranoia. But again, you see, if he had got up and said at Madison Square Garden, where I was one of only 2 white people in the hall that night, and actually it wasn't at all threatening. It was unpleasant, but it wasn't threatening. But he made a huge tirade against the Jews, and if you remember said, "And I tell you now, Jews, when God puts you in the ovens, it's forever." That wasn't very nice to be sitting in the back when that was going on. But who cares what he says? Suppose he'd said, which would be true, the real enemy of black America is the Irish. They kept us out of the building trades. Their police kicked us around in every city in the country for years. They treated us like muck. They thought they'd become white and look down on us and so on. That would all be quite largely true. Do you think the Irish would give a damn? Of course they wouldn't. If they even heard him say it, they'd say, "Who gives a damn? It's Planet of the Apes. Who is this geezer?" They wouldn't be hurt. No, but the Jews, what? A black guy? After all we've done for the black people? Yeah. Wail, wail, kvetch, kvetch. There's no crying in Judaism. Actually, unfortunately, there is too much crying in Judaism. So it works. So in other words, don't get too easily hurt. Grow a thicker skin. Don't become insensitive, but stuff like that really is pathetic. And it shows the underdevelopment of his community and the miseducation that they've got from many of their preachers.
I'm afraid I have to...
My dear Armenian comrade. No, I have to recognize a distinguished member of the Armenian parliament in Yerevan. Mr. Hovhannisyan, whose father is a great ornament of this campus, if I mistake not.
Yes, my father and my professor, Richard Hovhannisyan, who gave me my lowest grade when I was a student here at UCLA. So I'm very happy to be sitting behind the former foreign minister of the Kingdom of Thailand and among this very distinguished audience. Thank you very much for the challenge you gave us. It's not only Jews or anti-Semites who watch the film credits after a movie. It's the Armenians who also look for their IANs to have some sense of identification. I just wanted to ask you, in the example of your own patrol of the frontier between civilization and tyranny, between uniqueness and universality, in the legacy of Daniel Pearl, and that's we're here gathered to give a modern application to that legacy. How do you reconcile the individual pain that each nation feels? The Armenians, as you know, a generation before the Holocaust, were subject to a genocide and a national dispossession. How do we maintain our own identity, our own pain, our own suffering, but at the same time allow for a universal mainstreaming so that the never again is really never again for all of humanity? Thank you.
Well, I'm afraid we can't say never again, because the one bit of the pastor of Haggadah that I don't have any difficulty with says in every generation it's going to happen. It's going to. There's no question about it. And I've given the reasons why I think that will be true and why it's an honor. And though it's an awful thing to say that in the presence of people who suffered loss from it, I'd be doing them no favor if I pretended otherwise. Now, I have a quote here I didn't have time to read you from someone who used to be a great heroine of mine, Rosa Luxemburg, one of the great Jewish thinkers and mobilizers of the 20th century. If she'd won in Germany, I think there would have been no Nazism, and for that reason, probably no Stalinism either. So it's a tragedy. She's writing to her friend, Mathilde Wurm, from prison in 1917 when things are looking really bad, and she says, an anguished letter has come to her from Mathilde Wurm. Rosa replies, "What do you want with these special Jewish pains? I feel as close to the wretched victims of the rubber plantations of Putumayo and the blacks of Africa with whose bodies the Europeans play ball. I have no special corner in my heart for the ghetto. I'm at home in the entire world, where there are clouds and birds and human tears." Now, one wants to applaud that kind of internationalism and non-sectarianism, of course, but I don't quite do so, because remember, this is a woman born in Poland, in Zamość. She should have known by then that any sign of anti-Semitism is not that it's a sign that something bad is going to happen to the Jews. It's a sign that something very bad is going to happen to that society. It's an unfailing sign. I'm sorry, sir, I can't say that's true about Armenia. It is a particular tragedy. It was the first state-organized mass murder of the 20th century, planned and directed, and it'll be in our hearts always, and you know you can count on me. I've often appeared at meetings of the commemoration. But it doesn't matter which society you take. The expulsion of the Jews from Spain immediately means the regression of Spain into a medieval barbarism. The expulsion of the Jews from the attempt to create a Jew-free Germany, I don't have to tell you. The expulsion of the Jews from Iraq in 1948, 9, 50. There were more Jews in Baghdad than in Jerusalem when I was born. A terrific collapse, implosion of Iraqi society as a result. So we have no right, I think, to claim the special Jewish tears, if you want, but we have every right to say that anti-Semitism is not our problem, but it's a problem for civilization and it's the common enemy of humanity. And I think that's the right balance to strike. And I am sorry to say that I don't think it's true of Rwandans, of Irishmen, of gypsies, or anyone else to quite that extent. Though, of course, all racism is poison. There's a mania, there's a homicidal mania that lurks in anti-Semitism. That really is a plague, and needs to be fought with humor and hatred. Two endlessly renewable energy sources in my case.